If I somehow figured out a way to go back in time to tell my younger self what modern day gaming would be like, I probably would have lost my mind. Because we now have access to devices that play multiple consoles, can hold thousands of games, all available to us with a click of a few buttons. It wouldn't just sound implausible, but would sound like a gaming nirvana. But fantasies are often better in theory than in practice, because here we are in 2025 facing a strange and frustrating problem. This problem has a name. It's called choice paralysis. But what is choice paralysis and why do some of us suffer from it? And better yet, how do we overcome this modern day phenomenon? And there is a cure, and we'll get to that. But first, I want you to picture this. You've got hundreds of games in your library that you painstakingly curated, but somehow at that moment, none of them feel right. You open, you close, scroll, install, where suddenly having infinite choices feels more like a burden instead of a blessing. And instead of gaming, you end up scrolling on YouTube or TikTok, and sometimes even end up watching others play the games you once would have wanted to experience for yourself. Sound familiar? Well, studies have shown that most of us actually suffer from choice paralysis at no fault of our own. The book Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz digs deep into this experience and explores the very symptom that we not only face with modern day gaming, but in life in general. When there are so many choices vying for our attention all at the same time, it feels almost too overwhelming. And suddenly, making no choice at all feels a lot safer than making the wrong one. When our brain sees more options and choices, the more we subconsciously assume that there's a perfect one out there. So we end up trying to find that perfect choice, but the search leaves us less satisfied than if we had fewer choices to begin with. This can be seen not only in gaming, but in dating, in choosing a career path, and in virtually every other aspect of our modern day lives. The term FOMO comes to mind, and with social media platforms like X buzzing about new releases and DLCs or trending games, many of us feel pressure to play what's hot instead of what we enjoy. Schwartz's core findings in the Paradox of Choice boils all of this down to a harsh but illuminating truth. Too much choice doesn't make us freer or happier, it makes us more anxious, less satisfied, and often paralyzed. And no wonder we have a hard time enjoying gaming when Steam alone houses around 115,000 games. In 2024, nearly 19,000 games were released, meaning that's one game every 19 minutes. And when we look into how many retro gaming titles are out there, we can see why some of us can't settle on a single game. And to make matters worse, in 2025, many gamers, if not most, has access to virtually all of them. Now add live gaming services, mobile game subscription services into the mix, and this is just a recipe for choice paralysis. However, even with all of these options, this past week I actually found myself looking at the end credits of a game and I was suddenly hit with emotions I didn't expect. Rather than feeling accomplished and satisfied, I felt dread. The game in question is Pokemon Blue on the Game Boy, and unsurprisingly, but interesting nonetheless, is which system I actually finished this game on. It wasn't on one of the many emulation systems that I own, rather my Game Boy Pocket, which is a clue as to why I found it easier to complete on this system and not in a system where there are so many choices. When you're looking for a game to play, more often than not, you're searching for a feeling rather than searching for a game to play. But we have been conditioned through years of social media. The action of hopping from game to game, it mirrors a social media scroll. We've become accustomed to getting our dopamine hits quicker and easier, and as soon as friction comes into the picture, our brains are trained to seek the path of least resistance. But here's the good news. You can break out of this habit, and here's how you do it. The first step in combating this is by creating constraints. Here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna pick up one of these guys if you don't already have one, and archive all your precious games in here rather than on your system. Then, as crazy as this sounds, you are only gonna pick 3 to 5 games maximum and leave the rest on that drive. And it's usually at this point where you might begin to realize if you are either a maximizer or a satisficer, or however it's pronounced. Schwartz found that maximizers aim to make the best possible decision. They exhaustively compare every option and are the ones who scroll through Steam for 45 minutes and still feel unsure, whereas satisficers are those who look for a good enough option and tend to be happier overall. So when you're choosing your 3 to 5 games, do not search for that perfect one because perfect doesn't exist. Rather, just find the 3 to 5 that you naturally gravitate toward and don't overanalyze or second guess your judgment, which leads us to step 2. Step 2 is play what you feel, not what you own, and stick with it. Stop Stop chasing your backlog like it's homework. If a game doesn't fit your mood, just skip it, because gaming should serve you and not the other way around. More times than not, I do find myself questioning my decision. I would be playing a retro game and suddenly I would have this thought that I could be having a better time playing a more modern day title. After all, it's been some time since I fired up the Steam Deck, only to do just that, and I'll end up scrolling through my Steam library, instantly feeling overwhelmed by all the options. So to combat this, just assess your mood and energy level. Pick a game where there's less friction. Simple games like Stardew Valley or Super Mario games are a good idea if these games just get going right away. But if you're feeling energetic and amped, maybe try a beat 'em up or an adventure game like Oblivion Remastered. Now this works because it aligns gaming with your mental state, and once you pick a game, you have to lock in and stick with it for at least 20 to 30 minutes to give it a fair shot before allowing yourself to even second guess your decision. You pick a game matching your current mood and you're locked in. That's it, minimum 30 minutes. And while you're doing this, remember to eliminate that idea that there could have been a better choice, which is anticipated regret, and that kills your overall enjoyment. So once you make a choice on playing what you feel, comes the next part. And this is step number 3, which is set a timer. Now I know this might sound a bit unconventional, but desperate times calls for desperate measures. And even though most of us have very busy lives, you can at the very least set a timer for only 30 minutes. Tell yourself, I'm playing this for 30 minutes and there's no pressure to finish the game, you only have to show up. Because often just getting started is the hardest part. After those 30 minutes are up, if you don't feel like playing that game anymore, then you can stop playing and maybe pick it up the next day, or just play a different game entirely and start the clock for 30 minutes. And by doing this, you are forcing yourself to take action, which prevents the endless scrolling. And it works because it creates a structure and it reduces that decision making on the spot fatigue, which leads us to our final point, step number 4, one game at a time. You need to treat games kind of like books. You're not going to go and suddenly read 5 novels at once. Just pick one and stick with it and try to trust the journey. This might be the hardest point to practice because it involves a lot of responsibility. But since you only have 3 to 5 options to try, stick with one for that 30 minutes, and instead of thinking, oh, there's a better game that would be giving me more satisfaction, like a maximizer would, be a satisficer and think, I want to see how far I can get, or where does the story lead. And just remember, the tyranny of choice doesn't empower us, rather, choice becomes a burden. When we can play anything, we end up playing nothing. And when I look back on my journey with Pokemon Blue, I didn't plan to finish that game, it just kinda happened. And when I do look back on how I achieved this, it was by accident by applying these techniques. My Game Boy Pocket has a single cartridge for one game, and I found myself playing before bed as I wound down for my day. The longer I played, the more hooked I got into the game, and after a while it just became habitual. I didn't need to think, what game am I gonna play tonight? Rather, by minimizing the friction of choice, I only had to turn on the power button and pick up where I left off. And I actually found myself starting to enjoy the game, a feeling that I've struggled to find for a very long time. When I look at all of my other systems that I own, it only reinforces this theory about limiting yourself, that it was on the system with a single choice is where I actually finished a game in the past few months. You're not lazy, you're not burnt out, you might just be really overwhelmed, and in a world where every game is available, every second is monetized, and every genre is screaming for your attention, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is just choose one thing. So start small, play slow, and let gaming be what it used to be, which is fun and not some decision tree. The joy is in the playing and not the picking. Thank you so much for watching this video. It means a lot that you guys are here with me. If you liked it, definitely hit that subscribe button, as this community is slowly growing and I do respond to every comment, or at least I try to. And if you are into retro gaming, there is one retro game that I actually finished not too long ago on the Game Boy Pocket, and it was one of the most creepiest and unsettling experiences I've ever had. If this sounds interesting, definitely check out this video coming up right now.